I'm a headphone guy, as you probably know, but recently I decided to add some oomph to my desktop setup. And that led me to a fascinating pair of little speakers and one not so little speaker. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to Ellis Reviews, and thank you as always for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, just hit the button. So regular viewers of my channel will know that I listen to headphones pretty much all day. That is what I do, it's how I listen to my music. But if you've seen some of my past videos, you'll also have noticed a pair of pretty big KRK Rocket studio monitors sat on the desk. Now I'm gonna let you into a little secret, they were never connected. They used to be, I used to use them for music production quite a long time ago, but I just haven't had time or the inclination really to get them set back up. But that got me thinking, how can I get some sound onto this desk without taking up shed loads of space? I didn't want to sacrifice sound quality. I just wanted something that would fit nicely on the desk, look good, and yeah, sound good. And that led me to the Kanto YU2s, and I'm seriously impressed. So what are the YU2s? Well, they are powered desktop speakers. They've got a 3-inch driver, a 3/4-inch silk dome tweeter. They offer 100 watts of peak power, 50 watts RMS, which is pretty loud. And they've got quite a good frequency response as well. So they go right down to 80 Hertz, which isn't bad for a tiny little speaker, and up to 20 kilohertz. They also have a built-in amp and DAC, so you don't need to worry about anything apart from plugging them into your computer via USB. They're made from acoustic grade MDF, and that's about it. They're just desktop speakers. They cost £219 in the UK, so they're not cheap. Yes, I did add the little stands to mine, which I do think are pretty important, because if you don't have them on the stands, they just sit very flat. And unless you've got a shelf to put them on, for example, or you're putting them on a bracket, then they're a bit too low to be at the right level for listening, really. Now, those stands are £30, which again, isn't cheap. It's important to remember they're not Bluetooth. They are purely designed to be used for your computer. They do have an auxiliary in, so you can connect something via a jack if you need to. But I think most people would use the YU2s as a set of speakers for their computer. Build quality, they're fantastic, and they should be, because like I've said before, they're not cheap. You can get them in white, I think black as well, and they can be a gloss finish or a matte finish. I went for the white matte version, which I think look great. They're also nicely heavy. I like speakers that have got a bit of heft to them, because generally speaking, that means they're well built, they'll have a good cabinet, a good enclosure, which should, in theory, mean they sound pretty good as well. The only thing I don't really like is that little kind of blue LED light on the front, which indicates the power. It looks a little bit cheap, if I'm honest. It looks like one of those LEDs that you kind of attach to things at school when you're fiddling around with. You didn't do this, did you? No, but I remember doing something with LEDs at school. But anyway, it looks a little bit cheap. The rest of the build quality is absolutely fabulous. The dial on the back for the volume feels nice and just premium. I think you're getting quite a bit for your money, really. But I think the selling point for the YU2s really is that size. You can just put them anywhere, basically, and they just mold into your desk, and they look fantastic. The big question you probably have, though, is what do they sound like? Now, they're not big drivers. They don't have big speakers within them. They're 3-inch, like I said at the start, and you're not going to get lots of bass from that. But it's not bad, actually. It's quite punchy. For that size driver, it's quite a nice punchy sound. It doesn't go really deep, but it's just, there's a lot of warmth there. The highs as well, nice and crisp, not too much. I've like everything. So when I review headphones on this channel, I never EQ them. I have a lot of people ask me in the comments, what EQ settings are you using for those Sony XM4s or for whatever it is that I'm testing? I never touch them. And the reason for that, I want to hear this stuff as the manufacturer intends it. I've done the exact same thing with the YU2s. I've got them out of the box, plugged them in, and started playing stuff. The one thing that really hits you is the soundstage, which is very wide. Now, I've got them either side of quite a big monitor, admittedly, but the more you get into audio and the more you listen to speakers and headphones and things, the more you start to appreciate good quality separation. And by that, I mean the left and right. The left and right channels on these speakers are very well defined. It feels like a very wide stereo field. So if something is coming out of the left speaker, it really sounds like it is. It's very dispersed. I love that, and it gives it a bit of a premium sound quality, if you like. It's instantly noticeable. One thing to note, that they do seem to need driving, although they're powered, so you can't use an amp with them. You know, you just plug them in and start using them. They have a built-in amp and a built-in digital to analog converter. I have found that you do really need to crank up that volume. Certainly running them from my Mac Mini, I tend to have the volume on the Kantos about 5-10 past in terms of the volume, and then you're still pushing it in terms of the volume on the Mac. You're still way up there in terms of how much volume you're outputting. It's not massively loud at that either. It's nice, it's comfortable for a room of this size, and you could fill a room with these, but you do have to drive them. I have found that if you turn them down, say, I don't know, perhaps 1/4 2, it's quite quiet actually. I've noticed that. So again, not really a downside of these, but they just seem to like to be driven. So I listen to a lot of stuff, from kind of classical stuff to hip hop, electronic, rock, pop music, and they deal really well with all of that stuff. And I think part of that is because they are such a relatively simple sound. They're not particularly coloured, really. Quite a flat response, which I quite like on these sort of speakers. It's just punchy, nicely detailed, like I say, really nice wide soundstage. You'll be impressed. But there's one thing that left me wanting, and it's the bottom end, and that made me buy something else. So the YU2s have a sub out on the back of the left speaker, and as soon as I saw that, I just thought I need to plug something into that at some stage. I've invested quite a bit in a home cinema system, and I have a beloved Kef HTB2 subwoofer. If anyone is watching this and has that sub and they love it as much as I do, please let me know in the comments. So I've always had a thing for subs, and yeah, I just had to connect one to these Kantos. And the great thing is, the YU2s, like most of the Kanto range, like I say, they have this sub out, and Kanto themselves offer a range of subs. Now I went for the Sub8, which is obviously an 8-inch woofer. It's 250 watts. It goes from 35 Hertz at the bottom end up to 175 Hertz. Again, it's acoustic grade MDF. It's front firing. Some subs do fire downwards into the floor, but this one actually fires outwards. And it has all the settings that you'd expect from a sub. So it has obviously the crossover setting. I have mine set to 80 Hertz in case you're interested. And it also has a phase setting, which you might need to change if it doesn't sound quite right. I won't go into the details of what that does. Look it up if you're interested. Generally speaking, you leave the phase as it is. And obviously just a volume control. And it gave me what I wanted from these Kantos, which what I thought was missing, which was just that nice deep bottom end. And it's not about volume for me with subs. It's about offering a much deeper sound, a much richer sound. So as soon as you can start going down to 30, 35 Hertz, that's where the sub bass is, obviously, but it's also where a lot of the warmth from music comes across. And it just gave me this setup now, which isn't cheap. I'll come on to that in a moment, but it sounds great. It's a lovely thing to sit down and listen to. And as a result of that, I really am going between headphones now and the Kantos, because it just sounds so good. The sub is £289 in the UK. It's not expensive for a sub of this quality, because I think this is a good sub. It's not quite up there with the Kef that I have downstairs, but that Kef was, I think, about £1,000 at launch. So it's a completely different type of sub. It does mean that the entire package, so if you buy the Kanto YU2s plus the Sub8, you're looking at over £500 for the entire setup. Add in those stands, and yeah, it's about £540 that I spent on this. That's not cheap. That's not a cheap desktop setup. You've got to really want your desktop sound to be good to spend that much money. I totally get that. But I should reiterate that you can get by without that sub. Unless you like me and you want that, then go for it. But the Kantos on their own are great. So I think without the sub, the YU2s are a great option for people who want quality desktop sound, people who admire good construction, decent looking speakers, and also people who don't have much desk space. They're tiny, and for the sound they produce, they're just brilliant. And also, if you appreciate things like wide sound stages and detailed audio, the YU2s, I can guarantee, will really impress you for the price. They're not for you if you don't see the point in spending that much money on desktop speakers. And also, if you want things like Bluetooth, they're not Bluetooth, unfortunately. It would be nice if they were, actually. I'll come on to an alternative for that in a moment. But yeah, they're purely based around connecting to your computer or connecting that auxiliary if you need to. A word of warning, I think if you are like me and you buy the Kanto YU2s without the sub initially, you will almost inevitably buy the sub. So just bear that in mind. Break it into two investments. Buy the YU2s first, give it a month, give it a couple of months, then buy the sub. That way you've spread out the cost. But trust me, you will end up with a brilliant sounding system. Now, as always, when I look at products like the YU2s and the sub, which are pretty expensive to be fair, I like to look at an alternative. And that led me to the, let me get the name right, the Edifier R1850DBs. Now they're £159, which is a lot less than the YU2s. They're a lot bigger. They have 4-inch drivers, but they have lots more input. So for example, they have an optical input, coax input, and the auxiliary input, which admittedly the YU2s have as well. But they also have Bluetooth. So if that's a big thing for you, this is definitely an option to look at. The only thing I'm not keen on with the Edifiers, I'll come onto the sound in a moment, is the design. It looks a little bit, if I'm honest, 80s/90s. It looks a little bit old-fashioned. They look better if you remove the grills, to be fair, but if aesthetics is your thing with speakers, you might not like the look of the Edifiers. Equally, you might like them. They're perhaps a little bit traditional. They look a little bit retro, I suppose, in a certain way. That might be your thing. But they sound really good. they've got a little bit more punch than the YU2s, simply because they've got bigger drivers and the enclosure is bigger as well. So you'll get a bit more oomph out of them. They do also have a sub output if you want to go down that route of adding a sub. But I think the Edifiers, given their price, which is considerably less than the YU2s, I think they're a great option for people who don't have the space constraints on their desk. And also they've got the Bluetooth connectivity, which is genuinely useful actually. Definitely worth checking out as an alternative. I hope that review's been useful. If you are more of a headphone person though, keep watching for a link to the video I did recently where I compare the brilliant Sony XM4s versus the brilliant but expensive AirPods Max. But in the meantime, thank you as always for watching, and I will catch you on the next video.